Most people live their entire lives without realizing that there's a voice in their head that never stops talking. It narrates, it complains, it compares, it judges. This voice might sound like you, and it might even seem like it's I you, but it isn't. The moment you begin to notice this voice as something you can observe, a space opens up, a space of awareness. This is where your real power begins. Because in that space, you are no longer completely fused with the mental noise that drives emotional reactions like anger, frustration, and irritation. You see, the voice in the head, what many call the ego, feeds off reactivity. It wants to be right. It wants to defend its identity. And if someone says something that threatens this image you've constructed of yourself, it immediately jumps in to protect and reinforce that illusion. That's where anger arises. But if you're able to notice this mental pattern, to simply become aware of it without needing to change it or argue with it, a shift begins to happen. You start to become the observer rather than the participant in the drama your mind is creating. This doesn't mean the voice disappears. It may still arise. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and the voice immediately wants to say, "How dare they?" or "What's wrong with people?" But if you are aware, you'll hear it, and you'll realize, there's that voice again. You don't need to believe it, follow it, or act on what it's saying. Just noticing it creates distance, and in that distance is freedom. People often think the way to stop being angry is to suppress their feelings or force themselves to be calm. But that's not freedom, that's inattention. The real transformation happens not through suppression, but through awareness. You allow the thoughts to come and go, but you no longer identify with them. You are the sky. The thoughts are just passing clouds. When you know yourself as the sky, the clouds no longer have the power to disturb you. It might be helpful to realize that much of what triggers us in others is actually a reflection of something unresolved within ourselves. That's why the ego reacts. It feels threatened. It needs to maintain its identity, its sense of control, its superiority or victimhood. And so it clings to its stories. They're wrong. They shouldn't have said that. I deserve better. But who is this I that needs so desperately to defend itself? When you bring awareness to that question, something deeper awakens in you, something that doesn't need to defend or react, because it knows that its essence can't be touched by another person's behavior. You begin to see how the ego keeps the past alive through resentment or projects fear into the future through anxiety. It clings to these stories because it cannot survive in the present moment. And so the greatest gift you can give yourself is to become present, to notice your breathing, the sensations in your body, the sound around you. This presence quiets the voice in your head, not by force, but by making it unnecessary. The next time someone offends you or says something unkind, pause. Feel the reaction in your body, the heat, the tightness, and observe it. Don't judge it, don't push it away, don't explain it. Just notice. In that moment of noticing, you are no longer fully identified with the reaction. You're watching it. You've stepped back into the awareness behind it. That is where your peace lies. And from that place, you can respond or not respond without being driven by unconscious emotion. This is how you stop being angry, not by pretending you're not angry, but by no longer believing in the story that creates the anger in the first place. The moment you realize that the voice in your head is not you, that it's just a conditioned mental structure repeating patterns it learned long ago, you step out of its grip. You no longer have to take anything personally because you see that what others say or do is about them, not you. And you see that your inner reactions are echoes of the past, not the truth of the present moment. Freedom from anger doesn't come from having perfect people around you or living in a flawless world. It comes from no longer giving power to the voice that interprets everything as a threat or an insult. It comes from the stillness of awareness, from presence, from being here fully simply now. And in that presence, you realize nothing that anyone says or does has the power to disturb your peace, unless you believe the thought that tells you it should. That thought is just a whisper in the wind. Let it pass, let it go, let it go. What most people call their life is not life at all, but a stream of thoughts about life. Thoughts about what happened yesterday, what someone said last week, or what might go wrong tomorrow. Their attention is rarely, if ever, resting in the only place life truly unfolds, this moment, right here now. And it's in this absence, the absence of presence, where anger, irritation, and emotional suffering find room to grow. If you're not in the present, you're in a mental projection, And that projection, more often than not, is filled with judgment, resistance, and fear. There is a very simple truth that many overlook. Anger cannot survive in the present moment. Frustration, resentment, anxiety, all of these require time. They feed on past and future. Think about it. When you're angry, aren't you usually reliving something that already happened or imagining how things should be instead? The mind plays its story. They did this to me, or this always happens, or what if it gets worse? All of it exists in a time dimension. But when you step fully into the present, truly, completely here, there's just space, stillness. And within that stillness, there's no room for anger to hold on. Being present is not something you try to do. It's not about adding another effort or mental technique. Presence is what's already here, beneath the noise. You don't need to go looking for it. You just need to stop getting lost in the mental story. Try it now. Feel the weight of your body where you're sitting. Notice the breath entering and leaving your body. Listen to the subtle sounds around you. In this moment, there's nothing missing, nothing to fix. Just this, and it's enough. This is not about pretending that nothing ever bothers you or that life always unfolds in ways you prefer. There will always be moments that challenge you. People will act from unconsciousness. Situations will not align with your preferences. But the difference lies in where your attention is. When you are present, you respond. When you are lost in the mind, you react. Reaction comes from a place of identification. The ego feels attacked, and it defends. It needs to win. It needs to be seen, heard, respected. But presence doesn't need anything. It's already whole. So when something upsetting arises, you can allow it, not suppress it, not indulge it, but simply allow it to be. You observe it in the light of your awareness, and very quickly it begins to dissolve. What seemed like a big emotional storm reveals itself to be nothing more than passing weather, clouds that quickly vanish in the sky of your being. People often ask, but how do I stay present when life gets chaotic, when people are rude or unfair? The answer is simple, but not always easy. Choose this moment. Again and again, return to what is, not what you wish was or what should have been, but what is. Feel your feet on the ground. Take a conscious breath. Look without mental labeling. Hear without internal commentary. Just be here. And when the mind wants to pull you back into the drama, just notice it. You don't have to fight the thought. You don't have to argue with it. You just see it for what it is. A thought, a movement of mind, a form arising and falling. Don't make it personal. Don't make it your anger or your problem. It's just a thought, and the moment you see that clearly, its power begins to fade. What most people experience as suffering is not the event itself, but the resistance to it. The inner voice says, this shouldn't be happening. And that resistance becomes tension in the body, emotional turmoil in the heart, and chaos in the mind. But when you are present, you're not resisting life. You're meeting it directly. You're allowing the moment to be what it is without trying to twist it into something else. And in that allowing, you find peace. This peace isn't passive. It doesn't mean you never take action or speak truth when needed. It simply means that your action arises from clarity, not reactivity, from love, not fear, from presence, not past pain. There is a tremendous power in this, not the kind of power that controls or dominates, but the quiet strength of being rooted in the now, a strength that cannot be shaken because it isn't based on opinion or circumstance. It's based on awareness itself. So when you feel anger arising, or when someone pushes your buttons, pause. Don't rush to react. Don't go looking for reasons or justifications. Just feel what is happening inside you, the tightening, the heat, the urge to speak or act. Let it all be there. Watch it not with judgment, but with curiosity. Stay with your breath, stay with your senses, and notice what happens. Very often, in just a few moments, the entire structure begins to fall apart. What seemed like something solid and urgent melts into spaciousness. And in that space, you are free. You may have spent years, or even a lifetime, trapped in the cycle of reaction. But every moment is new. Every moment is a doorway. You don't need to carry the past with you, nor do you need to worry about the future. You can always return home, to the now. The now doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't care about your achievements or failures, your opinions or your fears. It simply welcomes you. And the more time you spend in this presence, the more natural it becomes, the less the ego can pull you back into its world of conflict and separation. Presence is not something distant or mysterious. It's the most natural thing in the world. It's what remains when you stop trying to control, defend, explain, or resist, And in that stillness, you come to know who you really are, not the personality, not the story, not the role, but the awareness behind it all. And from that awareness, nothing and no one can truly disturb your peace. You are already free. Just stop looking away. One of the deepest shifts that can happen in a human being is the realization that what others say or do has nothing to do with who you are. The moment that becomes more than just an idea and becomes your direct experience, something within you relaxes. You stop bracing yourself against the world. You stop constantly evaluating other people's words and actions through the lens of your identity. And most importantly, you stop taking things personally. Most of the suffering people experience in relationships with family, friends, strangers, arises from the belief that they are being attacked, disrespected, or dismissed. But what's actually being attacked? Is it really you, or is it an image you formed of yourself? When someone criticizes you, they're speaking not to your essence, but to a concept they have in their mind, often shaped by their own pain, expectations, and unconscious patterns. And if you're identified with your own concept of self, with your opinions, your history, your role, then naturally their words will feel like an assault. But when that identification begins to fall away, when you no longer believe in the need to defend an image, then the sting disappears. You realize it's not about you. This doesn't mean you become indifferent or detached in a cold way. On the contrary, you become more open, more alive, more present. You no longer meet others from a place of defensiveness. There's no longer a wall that needs to be maintained. You meet people as they are, and you allow them to be as they are, even if that means they are unconscious, reactive, or negative. Their behavior is theirs. It belongs to the state of their own inner world. You don't have to carry it. The ego, of course, wants to be acknowledged. It wants to be liked, respected, admired. It thrives on approval. And when that approval is not given, or when someone challenges its sense of importance, it reacts. It gets angry, hurt, offended. But all of that hinges on one mistaken assumption, that your worth is determined by how others see you, that who you are depends on their opinions or behavior. As long as you believe that you'll be at the mercy of every passing comment, every misunderstanding, every judgment someone throws your way, freedom begins the moment you realize that no one else is responsible for your inner state. You stop looking outward for validation or meaning, and you begin to experience what it's like to simply be, without needing to justify yourself. When someone insults you, you don't need to react, not because you're suppressing anything, but because the insult doesn't land. It doesn't find a place to stick. There's no reactive structure left for it to attach to. It passes right through you like wind through an open window. This isn't a technique or a strategy. It's not about putting on a calm face while secretly boiling inside. It's about seeing so clearly that what others say or do is a reflection of their inner world, not yours, that you no longer take it as something personal. And when you live from that clarity, you notice how much lighter everything becomes. You no longer carry grudges. You no longer replay conversations in your mind trying to prove you were right. You don't need to. You're no longer caught in that mental game. People around you may still behave in unconscious ways. They may criticize, complain, or project their pain onto you, but instead of reacting, you notice, you observe, you stay rooted in presence, and from that still place, you might even feel compassion, not a superiority or pity, but a deep understanding that they are trapped in a pattern of thought and emotion they don't yet see. Just as you once were, just as many still are, there is a kind of dignity that arises when you no longer depend on the world to tell you who you are. When you no longer shrink or swell in response to praise or blame, that dignity comes from presence, from awareness, from the silent knowing of your true nature, which is untouched by opinion, unaffected by behavior. Someone may say something sharp or critical to you. The old habit might arise, the need to defend, to explain, to counterattack. But if you stay present, if you feel your breath, your body, and watch the mental impulse without following it, something remarkable happens. The energy of that moment passes, and in its place there's space, a space where peace lives, where choice lives, where freedom lives. You begin to see how much of human interaction is based on unconscious reactivity. One person feels disrespected, they lash out. The other person feels attacked. They respond with anger. It goes back and forth endlessly. But when you step out of that loop, when you are no longer pulled into the pattern, something new becomes possible. You become the stillness in the room, the quiet presence that doesn't feed the fire, and in that stillness, Others may begin to sense their own stillness too. You may find that your relationships change, not because you're trying to change others, but because you've changed the energy you bring into every encounter. People sense when there is no resistance, no defensiveness, no ego to push against. They may soften, they may open, or they may continue as they always have. But either way, your peace is no longer dependent on their behavior. This is not something to achieve one day in the future. It's available now, in this moment. When someone says something you don't like, notice what arises in you, notice the thought, notice the emotion, and instead of reacting, just stay present. Feel the breath, feel the space, and ask yourself, is this really about me? Almost always you'll see it's not. You don't need to make anyone wrong. You don't need to prove anything. You can simply be, and in that being, there's an extraordinary power, the power to be untouched. Not because you've armored yourself, but because you've let go of the idea that there's anything to protect. When nothing needs to be defended, there is nothing to be attacked. So much of the suffering people experience isn't caused by what's actually happening, but by their inner resistance to it. Something occurs, someone says something, a situation unfolds, and instead of meeting it as it is, the mind immediately declares, this shouldn't be happening. That simple inner resistance, that mental no to what is, becomes the seat of anger, frustration, anxiety, and even despair. We resist not only big things, but small things, delays, interruptions, misunderstandings, mistakes, imperfections, all the little ways life doesn't match the mental picture we have. But life itself has never promised to conform to your preferences. The moment you accept this moment as it is, you return to sanity, you return to peace. This doesn't mean you have to like everything that happens. Acceptance doesn't mean approval or passivity. It simply means that you no longer add the weight of inner resistance to the reality that is already unfolding. You meet life where it is, not where you think it should be. That is the foundation of inner peace. When you are angry or bothered, ask yourself, am I reacting to the situation itself or to the mental story I'm telling about it? Almost always the emotional disturbance comes not from the event, but from your resistance to the event. You're arguing with reality. You're saying, this shouldn't be. And in doing so, you create tension. That tension doesn't change the situation. It only clouds your ability to see clearly. Now, it's important to understand that acceptance is not inaction. It is the starting point for all wise and effective action. When you resist, your actions are driven by fear, anger, or ego, and they often create more problems. But when you accept first, when you say inwardly, yes, this is what is right now, a space opens up. From that space, the right response can arise. Not a reaction, but a response. You're no longer trying to control life. You're moving with it. This becomes even more powerful in moments of conflict. Suppose someone speaks to you with aggression. The unconscious reaction might be to match their aggression, to defend yourself, to strike back. But if you can accept the moment, not the aggression itself, but this fact that this is what's happening right now, then you can remain present. You don't lose yourself in the noise. You stay connected to the stillness beneath the surface. And from there, you can respond with clarity. Sometimes that means speaking. Sometimes it means walking away. But whatever the action, it's rooted in awareness, not in the unconscious pattern of attack and defense. People are often afraid that if they accept what is, they'll become passive, powerless. But it's actually the opposite. Acceptance gives you power, the power to act consciously. Resistance blinds you. It keeps you stuck in the mental story, unable to see beyond your reaction. But acceptance frees your attention. It grounds you in the present. And in the present, you are clear, calm, alert. From that still point, true strength arises. Think of a tree in a storm. A rigid tree may break, but a flexible one bends with the wind and remains rooted. Acceptance is that flexibility. It allows you to bend with life's changes and challenges without breaking. It doesn't mean you have no boundaries or desires. It means you're no longer fighting life. You're working with it. Now, sometimes the resistance is subtle. It might show up as low-level irritation, impatience, restlessness. These are signs that, on some level, you are saying no to this moment. Perhaps you're waiting for the next thing, for someone to act differently, for something to go away, for the future to arrive. But the future never arrives as anything other than now. So if you're not at peace now, you're training yourself to never be at peace. The habit of resistance becomes your default, and life feels like a constant struggle. But the moment you notice the resistance and stop feeding it, you return to peace. You don't need to wait for life to be perfect. You don't need to wait for others to change. You can be free now simply by not resisting what already is. From there, you can take whatever action is needed, but you do it from a place of inner alignment. There's no longer that split between how things are and how I want them to be. There's just this and the next step as it reveals itself. Even in moments of deep challenge, illness, loss, disappointment, acceptance remains the key. It's not about pretending everything is fine. It's about saying, yes, this is the reality I'm facing. That simple yes opens your heart. It allows healing to begin. It allows support to reach you. And it reveals a deeper intelligence at work, one that the mind, with all its judgments and fears, cannot always see. Let life be as it is. Let others be as they are. Let this moment be what it is. That doesn't mean you won't move, grow, speak, or act. It means that you do so from the peace of having first said yes. Yes to now. Yes to reality. Yes to life as it is. Only from there does true change become possible, not because you're fighting what is, but because you've aligned yourself with a deeper flow, a greater intelligence that moves through all things. Let the moment be. Then act. There is a strange paradox in the way most people live. They crave peace, yet they resist stillness. They long for freedom, yet they constantly escape the present moment by seeking distractions, stimulation, and mental commentary. In truth, much of the emotional suffering, the anger, irritation, anxiety, arises because we've forgotten the simple power of stillness, a power that isn't loud or dramatic, but steady, quiet, and infinitely spacious. It is in stillness that your real strength lies, not in control, not in dominance, not in the ability to win an argument, but in your ability to remain unmoved when everything around you is pulling for a reaction. To not react is not weakness. To not lash out, to not take the bait, to not be pulled into the unconscious energy of others, that is immense power. There's a silent strength in it that cannot be touched by outer circumstances. You may appear still on the surface, but that stillness comes from a depth most never discover because they never stop long enough to feel it. Look closely and you'll see most reactions come from fear. Even anger, when examined, usually has fear underneath, fear of being disrespected, misunderstood, unseen, unloved. The ego reacts to protect itself. And when it feels threatened, even in small ways, it strikes back. But your essence doesn't need protection. Your true being cannot be diminished by what someone says or does. When you know this, not as a theory, but as a living experience, you are no longer compelled to react. You remain still, not out of suppression, but because there's nothing to defend. This doesn't mean you don't feel emotions. You will still feel the stirrings of energy in the body, but instead of acting them out, you simply observe. You let the wave rise and fall without identifying with it. That inner spaciousness, the ability to hold the energy without losing yourself in it, is the very definition of freedom. And the more you live in that space, the less power the world has to shake you. In conversations, especially when they become tense or emotional, the pull to react can be strong. You may feel the impulse to interrupt, to correct, to assert your opinion, but notice what happens when you don't follow that impulse. When you stay silent, even for a few extra seconds, in that pause, you give yourself the gift of clarity. You see the pattern more clearly. You hear not just the words being spoken, but the pain or fear behind them. You're no longer caught in the surface drama. You've dropped into a deeper listening, one that doesn't need to win, doesn't need to be right, and doesn't need to protect anything. That space is where wisdom lives. Insight doesn't come from the mind scrambling to defend itself. It comes from the quiet underneath, the still presence that sees the whole picture without getting involved in the noise. And when you respond from that space, your words carry weight. They don't add to the confusion, they bring something new. Something that isn't reactive, but real. Most people confuse silence with weakness. But silence, when it comes from presence, is immensely powerful. It can dissolve conflict. It can shift the entire energy of a conversation. Because silence is not the absence of communication, it's the presence of something deeper than words. In silence, the ego has nothing to feed on, and so it begins to quiet down. And in that quiet, something else can emerge, a connection beyond words, a recognition of shared being. This doesn't mean you never speak up or set boundaries. Stillness is not passivity. It's not being a doormat. It's the foundation from which conscious action arises. You can speak truth without hostility. You can say no without anger. You can walk away from a situation without needing to prove anything. And you'll notice the more rooted you are in stillness, the more effective your actions become. Not because they are louder, but because they come from a place that is deeply aligned with truth. Often we think we need to react quickly, to say something immediately, to act fast, to respond right now. But urgency is rarely wisdom. The world may push you to move quickly, but real clarity never rushes. It arises naturally in the space that opens when you stop reacting and start being present, even in situations that appear urgent. The greatest clarity often comes in the moments of stillness. You begin to see that not everything needs your opinion. Not every comment needs a response. Not every argument needs your participation. There is great freedom in realizing that you can let things pass. You can watch a storm of emotion rise in another person and not get pulled into it. You can let people have their drama without making it your own. And this isn't indifference, it's clarity. You care more, not less, because you're not blinded by reactivity. You can see the person, the situation with fresh eyes. You don't add to the fire. You become the calm in the center of the storm. And that calm is not something you create. It's already there, beneath the noise of thought and emotion. You return to it by simply choosing not to be pulled out of yourself. Not resisting others, but not joining their unconsciousness either. Just staying rooted, steady, present. This stillness is not fragile. It's not easily broken. It's what remains when the rest has fallen away. You can walk through chaos, through criticism, through misunderstanding, and still carry peace within you. Because that peace isn't based on conditions. It's not dependent on others being kind or life going smoothly. It's deeper than that. It's who you are, and in living from that place, you become a mirror for others. You show what's possible, not by teaching or preaching, but by embodying it. People may not always understand it. At first, they may be confused by your lack of reaction, your refusal to join the emotional drama. But something in them recognizes it. The stillness calls something forward in them too. And that's how the world begins to shift, not through force, but through presence. Stay deeply rooted in the stillness of your own being. Let it be the ground you walk on, the space from which you live, and you'll see that what once disturbed you, what once pulled you out of yourself, no longer has the same hold. You are free. When you observe the patterns of the mind long enough, you begin to see that most of the upset you experience isn't because of what's happening around you, but because of what you believe about what's happening. The mind has a way of creating narratives, judgments, and interpretations, and then reacting emotionally to those stories as if they were absolute truth. But these thoughts, no matter how convincing they seem, are not facts. They are mental activity, and if you are completely identified with your thoughts, then you will be tossed around by every situation, by every comment someone makes, by every minor inconvenience. You will live in reactivity, not in reality. To become free of anger, to no longer be bothered by what others say or do, you must begin by watching your thoughts as if from a slight distance. Not fighting them, not judging them, not trying to change them, simply watching. In that watching, something powerful occurs. You realize you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which those thoughts appear. And from that awareness, there is no need to believe everything you think. Just because the mind says, he disrespected me, or she shouldn't treat me like that, doesn't mean it's true. It is only a mental position, one that often arises from the ego's desire to feel superior or to be in control. When you begin to notice these thoughts as they come and go, without immediately reacting to them, a new space opens up inside you. In that space, there is peace. There is room to breathe. You can hear the thought, see it arise. This isn't fair. I need to speak up. They're wrong. And instead of following it, you pause. You feel the energy of the moment, the pull of old conditioning, and you just stay present. Alert, watching. In that simple watching, the thought loses its grip. It no longer has the power to carry you into emotional reactivity. This is where the transformation begins, not by controlling the world, not by making people behave the way you want, but by seeing clearly what happens in your own mind. You begin to see the same patterns repeating: judgment, blame, defensiveness, resentment. And as you notice them again and again, you begin to question them. You begin to ask, is this thought true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? And very often, the answer is no. You realize the thought is just one possible way of looking at the situation. But the mind treats it as fact. It builds an entire emotional reaction around it. And you suffer not because of what happened, but because of the story you told yourself about what happened. Sometimes the story is very subtle. It might be a quiet thought like, "They always ignore me," or "I never get the respect I deserve." And if you don't catch it, you'll feel anger, sadness, or bitterness rising, and you won't know why. But when you begin to live with awareness, you start seeing the thought as it arises. You start recognizing it not as you, but as a conditioned pattern, perhaps something learned long ago. And just by seeing it, by becoming aware of it, it begins to loosen its grip. This is not about fighting your mind. It's not about trying to force yourself to think only positive thoughts. That's just another form of resistance. It's about becoming the space in which the mind can be seen clearly. Thoughts are not the problem. Identification with them is. When you believe that every thought is your identity, your truth, your reality, you will always be a slave to the mind's fluctuations. But when you realize that thoughts come and go like clouds passing through the sky, and that you are the sky itself, then you are free. Now, the mind won't like this. It wants to be in control. It wants to label everything good, bad, right, wrong. It wants to find fault, assign blame, protect its self-image. And so when something happens, the mind immediately interprets it through its own lens of past experiences, fears, and desires. But you don't have to go along with it. You can stay rooted in presence and simply observe. And in that observing, you may find a deep sense of humor beginning to arise, a lightness. You see how dramatic the mind can be, how seriously it takes itself. And you start to smile at it, not with contempt, but with compassion. Because you see, the mind is not your enemy. It's just trying to keep you safe based on old patterns. But you no longer need to let it run the show. The more you rest in that space of awareness, the more peace becomes your natural state. Not because your life becomes perfect, but because your inner relationship to thought has changed. You no longer believe every story that arises. You no longer build your identity around what someone else said or did. And you no longer need the world to behave a certain way in order for you to feel whole. That is true freedom. Eventually, even when anger arises, and it may still arise because emotions are part of the human experience, you will notice it immediately. You'll feel the heat, the tightness in the body, the surge of energy, and you'll know anger is here, but you won't be consumed by it. You won't act from it. You'll let it move through you like a wave, and you'll return to stillness. You'll return to yourself. This is not something you need to achieve in the future. It's available now, in this very moment. All it takes is the willingness to watch the mind without getting involved in every thought it throws at you. The willingness to rest in presence again and again. And from that presence, you meet life not with resistance, but with clarity, not with reactivity, but with peace, not with fear, but with love. No thought, no matter how loud or convincing, has the power to disturb you unless you give it that power.